Aspen's cheeks coloured at the insult, but it was so childish, not at all like some of the words the boys at Graham's were capable of spouting, it didn't really bother her. She'd heard worse. Dopey, by contrast, was almost endearing. It made Aspen think of the dwarfs from Snow White. That's weird to say, but okay. Spurred on by a newfound curiosity, Aspen began to search about the kitchen. A small part of her worried that she was being disrespectful to Miss Lee's memory. Wasn't opening these drawers and cupboards tantamount to robbing a pharaoh's tomb? But Miss Lee hadn't been buried inside her home, Aspen reasoned. And anyway, Miss Lee wouldn't have minded even if she had been alive. Miss Lee had always liked it when Aspen took an interest in her ornaments, her paintings, and her potted aloe plants. She liked answering Aspen's questions. As Aspen examined the kitchen, she searched, not for physical objects, but memories. She could remember, if not fondly, then with faint nostalgia, Miss Lee's rose-patterned plates, her faux silver cutlery, her china mugs, decorated with pictures of kittens that they'd taken tea out of every Sunday. But to Aspen's disappointment, oh no. Like the nursery rhyme about the old Mother Hubbard, all the cupboards and drawers were bare. Old Mother Hubbard lived in the cupboard. What the hell is that nursery rhyme? I don't feel like it's that. Let's have a look at it, shall we? Old Mother Hubbard rhyme. Well, I guess the best place to go would be the wiki. Oh yeah, it's Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to give her the poor dog a bone. When she came there, the cupboard was bare, and so the poor dog had none. She went to the baker's to buy him some bread. When she came back, the dog was dead. She went to the undertaker's to buy him a coffin. When she came back, the dog was laughing. What a weird rhyme. I feel like it's changed. It changed. Possibly at some point. But yeah, that's a crazy. Althea had been right. People had stolen everything, even the bits and pieces that couldn't be worth all that much, like the old-fashioned potato peelers and the cookie molds that Miss Lee's lovely old teapot. All that remained, unnoticed or unwanted, was a rusty old bread knife rattling around on its lonesome in the back of what had once been the cutlery drawer. Everything's gone. I told you so. Even the plates are gone. Miss Lee really loved those plates. They were a wedding present when she got married to her husband. They were from her mother-in-law. Well, I can't imagine either of them will be missing those plates much now. The casual, offhand way Althea spoke bothered Aspen, though she wasn't sure why. She was being silly, Aspen told herself, attaching so much value to the plates she'd eaten pink wafer biscuits from. She'd never even liked attending Miss Lee's little tea parties, and the house had always smelt of mints. Why was she feeling so defensive? It looks like they left this bad boy behind, though. Althea reached into the sacked cutlery drawer and extricated the rusty old bread knife. Aspen eyed her anxiously. You should be careful with that thing. Don't be daft. It's so old I doubt it can cut through butter. That'll be why nobody pinched it. A shaft of moonlight spilled through the gap-toothed window. It caught on the side of the blade so it shimmered. You know... Althea looked at Aspen, her eyes narrowed. I don't have any fingerprints. This was such a bizarre non sequitur, Aspen wasn't sure what to say other than, excuse me? You heard what I said. I don't have any fingerprints. I was born without them. That isn't true. You're teasing me. No, I'm not. I'm being perfectly honest. The pads of my fingers are completely smooth. They've always been like that. I could go through this house touching absolutely everything and nobody would know I'd been here. Althea's grip about the knife tightened. She squeezed it so hard her knuckles turned white. I could stab you with this knife right now and the police would never know I'd touched it. They'd probably think you committed suicide. Now wouldn't that be an interesting murder? Agatha Christie, eat your heart out. Aspen eyed the blade of the knife uneasily. Though the blade was rusted, like Althea said, she still didn't like the thought of it being plunged into her neck. Her skin would tear away, just like wrapping paper. Then she'd start bleeding. Even a blunt, rusty knife could cause a lot of damage when presented with a canvas of unsullied human skin. I don't know if you're joking, but it's not funny. I'm not joking, I'm being perfectly honest. But I guess honesty isn't always the best policy. Not when you're talking about murder, no. Sorry, I was just kidding around. It's not like I'd really kill you, you know? I hope not. Althea smiled apologetically and shrugged her shoulders. She set the knife back down in its drawer, giving the blade an almost reverent caress, and shut it back away in the dark. I guess my thoughts can be a little messed up sometimes. I've been spending too much time in this old house reading about... Is that... Poirot? Fuck, how do you say his name? That guy. Wait. I don't know why I can't say his name, but anyway. And Miss Marple. Aspen frowned. You read detective fiction? Aspen's father was rather fond of Agatha Christie. Their shelves back home were crammed with dozens upon dozens of slim paperback novels rescued from charity stores. Penny was always getting on at James to sell some of those old books off. She said they didn't have enough space. James, being James, ignored her and made jovial remarks about his wife being the next Marie Kondo. Penny was not impressed. Bits and pieces. The dearly departed left a huge collection of books behind, and I was going through them. You've been reading a dead woman's books. Well, why not? They're about the only things that didn't get stolen, and her collection is pretty interesting. Do you want to take a look? It's more exciting than the kitchen, at least. Well... Aspen frowned. For a few moments, she felt unsure. Althea was pretty, yes, and she was bubbly and exuberant and mostly fun to talk to, but her sadistic jokes and her macabre sense of humour seemed a fair indication that all was not entirely right with her. Who joked about committing murder, particularly with someone they barely knew? But Aspen had made a pinky promise, and that formed a binding contract that couldn't be broken. Aspen had vowed she would be Althea's friend, and she didn't want to go back on her word. She didn't want to let Althea down, and so it was, with a small smile, Aspen finally acquiesced. Oh, all right then. Great, let's take a look. I'll lead you on a guided tour of what once was Miss Lee's home. I'm the one who used to come to this house every Sunday. I think I could give a better tour than you. Yeah, but you only knew this house when it was alive. You haven't seen much of it now it's dead. Aspen opened her mouth, ready to say, what? That Althea was being ridiculous, or as she herself had termed it, dopey? The layout of Miss Lee's house hadn't changed after her death, though Miss Lee's belongings were more scuffed and dirty and dusty than they had been, what belongings that hadn't been stolen, at least. The house was still the same house. At least it was, logically. But logic didn't always apply to reality. There was something slightly subtly wrong about Miss Lee's home now Miss Lee no longer lived there. It didn't smell of mints and musky lavender perfume. Instead, it smelt of decay. Maybe Althea was right. Maybe the house had changed in some great, irreversible way since Miss Lee's death. Now it was just an empty structure without an owner, divorced from the other neat square homes on Paradise Road, a faint, tremulous entity filled with nothing but memories. All right then, I'll follow you. Good girl, I knew you'd see it my way. Now, let me get my torch. Althea turned back to the washing machine. Aspen noted for the first time a white tote bag resting upon the old appliance, which must have belonged to Althea. It matched her outfit. Aspen wondered what was inside the bag other than the torch. A mobile phone, house keys, her wallet? Somehow those articles all seemed too mundane. Such personal effects didn't suit the girl in white, with her insatiable love for theatrics and drama. Alright, here we are. Althea extricated the torch from the bag and turned it on. A small circle of orange light emitted from the head of the torch. So, my lovely assistant, shall we get going? Right. Their path illuminated by the artificial orange light of the torch, Althea led them out of the kitchen and into the hallway. It was much darker away from the kitchen, with its windows With its window open to the elements, all other windows in the house had been boarded with plywood, as had the front door. The hallway was completely black, save for Althea's torch. No moonlight would reach them in here. As they crossed the hallway, the old wooden floor creaking in protest, Aspen glanced about. Parts of the hallway looked the same as she remembered. There was the green wallpaper, the little wooden table, and the tall, skinny coat stand that looked like a denuded tree. The wallpaper was starting to peel, however, and somebody had taken both the old telephone and the vase of fake flowers from the table. Miss Lee's thick woolen coats and hats and scarves were missing from their stand. Her shoes, beige pumps, flats and slippers, were gone. Somebody had even flinched the paintings of boats and seagulls that had been displayed on the wall. Aspen could see the patches of wallpaper that were brighter than the rest, conspicuous rectangles that showed that something was missing. Aspen shivered, winding her arms around her middle. Is it colder in here, or is it just me? It's you. You're imagining things. Everything's boarded up. The wind can't get us in here, right? Right. Now, in we go. Althea's free fingers reached out in the darkness. Her palm rested flat against the wooden door, which Aspen knew led to the living room, and gave it a push. The door opened with a low creak. The noise was almost ominous, like a whispered warning. But Althea didn't seem like the sort to care about silly things like omens. Not if they got in the way of her fun. Althea entered the living room and Aspen trailed close behind. The living room, more so than the kitchen or the hallway, held a lot of memories for Aspen. This was where she and Miss Lee would sit, in those overstuffed armchairs. Aspen was strangely relieved to find the chairs were still there, though somebody had pinched the cushions, and talk. In the past, this room had been infused with the scent of freshly brewed tea, but now it smelt of sawdust and neglect. Okay, another little comment about the writing. You don't need to put so many brackets in. It kind of disrupts from the flow, and I know this because I have done it in my latest writing, I feel like, and I knew it interrupted the flow when I read it back. The circular clock was gone from the wall, and somebody had stolen the old VHS player and the poof where Miss Lee used to rest her heavy, weary legs. The cabinet where Miss Lee had displayed all her little china figures had been ransacked. Most of the figures were missing, and those that weren't had been smashed. At least, Aspen tried to console herself. Miss Lee had given her that tiny ballet dancer on her birthday. Part of the old woman's collection still survived, undusted and neglected on Aspen's bookshelf. The squatters and the thieves hadn't been content to simply take, however. They had left a few tokens of their own. Empty beer cans, crumpled takeaway cartons, and an old sleeping bag. Aspen looked at Althea anxiously. People don't live in this place, do they? I don't think so. It's just ghosts now. You haven't seen anybody else around? Just you, like I said, and I've come here quite a lot. But that sleeping bag... Ignore it. I don't think anybody's coming back for it. Althea kicked the crumpled sleeping bag into a corner dismissively. That isn't what I wanted to show you. Look at all these. Althea shone the light of her torch on a bookshelf that was set against the wall. Aspen looked at it curiously, her brow furrowed. Though the china cabinet had been mostly cleared out, the bookshelf remained in almost perfect condition. No sticky, thieving fingers had bothered trying to prise these firmly packed books from their perch, or if they had, they'd soon given up. They're all here. That's right, I mean, who cares about books in today's day and age? It's kind of funny, actually. What is? The thieves cleared out the china cabinet and all the pictures from the walls, but they didn't touch the books. I guess they figured these books were worthless, or maybe they just didn't want them. It'd be hard to run off with all these books. They'd be too heavy. You're not wrong, but some of these old things are actually kind of rare. I was looking through this shelf, I'm nosy like that, and some of these books look like legit first editions. Take this, for instance. Althea stood on her tiptoes and reached for the topmost shelf of the bookcase. With a bit of effort, she managed to pry free a hardback book with a deep blue cover. See? She held the book up to Aspen, smiling proudly. Aspen looked at the cover, illuminated by the orange glare of the torch. She could pick out the title written in red letters against the royal blue. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. That's right, it's Agatha Christie. The old woman must have loved her. It looks like a genuine first edition from 1926 too. You know, books like this can sell for a lot of money. Serious collectors will pay hundreds of pounds for this sort of stuff. Really? Really. Collectors are crazy like that. This isn't the only first edition here either. There's a whole bunch of rare books on these shelves. But I guess the thieves thought those china figures would fetch more money. Althea snorted. What morons. They took all the worthless junk and left the real treasure behind. How do you know so much about these books? About books? Why'd you ask? Is there something wrong with that? Not really. I just didn't expect that from you, I guess. I'm full of surprises. Althea giggled and turned back to the bookcase, standing on the tips of her toes like a ballerina. Again, ballerina. She inserted the hardback volume back among the others. You broke into Miss Lee's home too, you know. I know. I guess this makes us partners in crime then, just don't tell anybody. I don't have anybody else to tell. Poor thing, you sound so sad. Well, I know just the thing that'll cheer you up. What? I was working my way through some of the late Miss Lee's books, and there really is some interesting stuff in here. There's a lot of detective stories, some classics, old children's books, some Ian Fleming's, and there's also a whole bunch of romance stories. Romance? Yeah, old-fashioned bodice rippers. They're kind of funny. Look. Althea took another book from the shelf. It was another hardback, thicker than the Agatha Christie, with a pink cover featuring a slender, pretty woman swooning into the arms of a muscular man. What's this? The Virgin and the Viscount? It's exactly what it looks like. Do you want me to read a bit? Aspen didn't. Reading such a book felt far too intrusive somehow, like cutting open Miss Lee's desiccated corpse and peering at all her insides. It's going a bit far. Laughing at the romantic tastes of a woman who'd been dead for 6 months was far too cruel. Althea, however, seemed to take Aspen's silence as consent. That happened to Aspen with discomforting regularity. Why did nobody ever wait for her to voice her opinion? Maybe she was such a pushover, they assumed her consent was given. This is a really good part, you'll love it. Althea opened the hefty tome one-handedly, still gripping the torch, and glanced down, searching for a particular passage. She cleared her throat. Then she began to read. The tall, broad-shouldered man took her in his large hands and held her close. Crushing her small, helpless body against his chest, he moved his fingers downwards, slipping them beneath the hem of her skirt. Annabelle's body shuddered, in equal parts fear and passion, for she had never been held in such an intimate manner, least of all by such a hulking figure who, despite being a member of the aristocracy, am I saying that right? Aristocracy. Whatever, had all the latent strength of a common labourer. Annabelle struggled, though whether it was against her captor or her own desire, she did not know. Her resistance, however, was to little avail. She was soon overpowered, as Darby pushed and pinned her down against the four-poster bed. "Don't squirm so, my dear," said Darby, caressing Annabelle's porcelain skin with his fingers. "If you lay still, it won't hurt as much, and it needn't hurt. I don't wish to cause you pain." Doing kitten. Just grabbing me. Then. She's like purring and reaching out, and she's grabbed my shoulder. She patted my face when I kissed her paw. He's okay. Okay, and he sealed her trembling lips with a firm, hard kiss. Aspen felt her face turn redder and redder. She shifted, anxious, from foot to foot. Stop it, Kin. She's got the sillies now. Althea, for her part, looked utterly unconcerned. She skimmed through the pages of the book with amusement, her eyes shining. "Can you believe it? It's so filthy." I had no idea Miss Lee read books like that. I mean, she was so old. I guess she had to occupy herself somehow. I don't want to think about that. You little prude. No, I'm not. You are. Who are you to begrudge an old woman's fantasies? It's not harming anybody. Besides, Didn't you say her husband died? He died a long time ago, before I was born, but... Well, there you go. No wonder she read things like that. I feel sorry for the old dear being cooped up in this house all alone. Can you begrudge her for turning to her stories for comfort? The body might get older, but the mind remains young, and you can't put an age on passion. But despite Althea's charitable words, she was sniggering like a schoolgirl who'd come across all too realistic diagram of the male anatomy in a biology textbook. Being serious for a sec though, this book is super trashy. I tried to read it, but I couldn't get more than 50 pages in. I'd never let a guy I hardly know, who I don't even like, do things like that to me. And why does he have to be so forceful? I think girls are much softer and prettier than men. Alright, this cat's gonna be a menace for a second. There it was again. The word pretty. Come on, get down on my lap. The word pretty. Yeah, okay, I can't see the screen. Althea had used it to describe Aspen before, and now she'd said it again, without any trace of embarrassment. Althea slotted the book back into the shelf, then set the torch down on Miss Lee's old rocking chair, a curious expression on her face. Oh my god, she's so soft. You know what? What? You're much, much more my type than the guy from that book. Case in point. And before Aspen could open her mouth and object. She felt a gentle sensation against her cheek. Althea's lips. Althea was kissing her. It was at this point Aspen started to wonder whether or not she was hallucinating. But a mere hallucination would never have felt so soft. Gay. Aspen spent much of the previous night and the day that followed it thinking about that kiss. What did it all mean exactly? Where is this kitten? What is she doing? Oh my god, being an idiot. She's being an idiot. Althea had called Aspen pretty on numerous occasions, and she claimed to enjoy seeing pretty girls blush, but Aspen was under no illusions when she came to her appearance. One second, I have to sort this cat out. Okay, now I'm gonna have cat hair all up in my nose for ages. Aspen's hair was dark and fell loosely around her shoulders because she didn't know how to style it. Her hair looks fucking good. She had a full fringe, mostly tied to her forehead and her tragically thin eyebrows, which she'd always been self-conscious about. Okay, is this me? I have a full fringe to hide my forehead. My eyebrows aren't thin, they're thick, which I know is a good thing apparently to people who have eyebrows. Obviously, I guess it's better to have thicker eyebrows, but because you know you can do more with them and probably style them more how you would want. But I've never known how to like shape them properly. I've never known how to do that. I've always felt that was very hard. And you know, back when I was a kid, you didn't do your eyebrows like you do nowadays. They were thin. They were thin eyebrows. And just in like there wasn't any flair to them or anything. It was just neat. You know? So, and my eyebrows never did that. My eyebrows have always been wild. I haven't done anything to my eyebrows in such a long time. And yeah, my fringe hides that fact. So I feel a bit of kin with this lady. I do. She had a bump in her nose and its tip always seemed a little too pointed for her soft, heart-shaped face. I don't know if I have a heart-shaped face. I don't think I have a heart-shaped face. And I don't have a bump in my nose. I don't think I have a pointed nose. I've been told I have a ski slope nose by my own mother, so there's that. She never wore makeup. She'd never been taught how to apply it. No one taught me how to apply makeup either. Penny didn't bother with the stuff. She said it irritated her face, and anyway, most of it was tested on animals. And Aspen had followed suit. Unlike most of the girls at Graham's secondary, Aspen didn't have pierced ears. She was a horrible baby, and she was afraid of needles. Well, it's not me. I even got my lip pierced. When the nurses had come to school to give the girls cervical cancer vaccinations. How do you get that? We never got that. Aspen had almost fainted from fright. Aspen's face had gone white and pasty, well, pastier than it was already, and she'd started trembling. Again, look, person who wrote this, I know you'll never watch this, but we know she's pasty. We know she's hella white, right? We know she's really pale. You do not need to remind us that she went even paler. There's just not really a need. And she'd started trembling, and she could hardly hold her arm still long enough for the poor nurse to insert the needle. The nurse had been awfully nice about it, and she tried to comfort Aspen as best she could, but her kind words had been unable to abate Aspen's fear. Give me 1 second here. Can you get a shot for cervical cancer? Oh, okay, so it's a vaccine against HPV, which in turn helps protect against cancers caused by HPV, including cervical cancer, so it's a HPV vaccine. And this is a recent thing. From September 2009, all 12 and 13-year-olds in school year 8, which is 1 year above when you enter secondary school, will be offered on the NHS the HPV vaccine. We never got that. Why didn't we get that? It's probably... is it relatively new? I don't know. I just got the TB shot. Probably other things when I was younger. But yeah, the TB shot was one because you had to get that thing on your arm. I guess to see if you were like allergic to it or something. You had to get it on your arm, your lower arm. Like a little jabby thing. With a bunch of, which had like a bunch of holes in it, I feel like. And then you got the TB shot in your upper arm. And on some people you can tell where they had it because it like formed into something, but I never had that. Anyway, another good old tangent, even though I do not have the time for tangents. Whatever. The other girls in her year, meanwhile, hadn't been so nice. They made fun of her. She wasn't ugly, she supposed, but she wasn't particularly pretty either. Tell that to the person who designed you. You are pretty. She was plain in every sense of the word, and she was a horrible coward to boot. Nothing about her really stood out. Other than her innate knack at finding corpses, or a corpse, Aspen didn't feel much like diversifying her portfolio on that account. Why then had Althea kissed her? Maybe Aspen thought as she lay on her bed and stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to her ceiling she'd been teasing her. That seemed like the most likely explanation. Althea was the kind of girl who enjoyed getting a rise out of others. She'd told that tale about not having fingerprints after all, and Aspen very much doubted she'd been telling the truth. Why wouldn't she be teasing about this? But by that token, why would she bother teasing her about such a thing to begin with? It was all so confusing, but it was not, Aspen thought, her very first kiss. That had occurred several years ago, back when she still tried to suffer through her ballet lessons. There had been a girl in Miss Russian Lady's juniors class with blue eyes and curly brown hair. She'd had her own toe shoes long before they'd even started to learn how to go on point. That was why Aspen remembered her, though she'd not seen her for several years. That and the kiss. Charlotte, eh? Her name had been Charlotte, and she'd always been peculiar. Charlotte used to pinch and poke Aspen, and sometimes she'd give her painful Chinese burns that left red marks. She would offer to help Aspen tie up her hair, then gouge her scalp with bobby pins until Aspen whimpered in pain. Once, Charlotte had stolen Aspen's trainers from her locker while they were getting changed after class, and she'd refused to give them back no matter how Aspen begged. She'd made Aspen cry. Penny had never liked Charlotte. She'd call her a bully. It's because her parents don't rein her in properly, Penny said as they drove back from the ballet school one night, her fingers clenched tightly around the steering wheel. They should give her a good smack. That would sort her out. In fact, I have half a mind to do it myself. But Aspen hadn't wanted her mother to smack Charlotte. She couldn't bear the thought of anybody hurting her. Though Charlotte had been devious and at times outright cruel, she didn't deserve that. Despite all her teasing, Charlotte had possessed a sweet side. Once, during practice, Aspen had fallen over. She cut her leg and tore a hole in her tights and started to whimper. It had been Charlotte, not the other girls Penny approved of, who'd taken Aspen to the toilets and dabbed at her bloody knee with a wet paper towel. While Aspen sniffled, trying to stem the flow of hot tears that spilled down her cheeks, Charlotte had entwined their fingers together and looked into her eyes. "Don't worry," she said softly, like she was a mother and Aspen was her little girl. "It'll stop hurting soon." "But it hurts now." "Then I'll take your mind off of it," Charlotte had said, and just like that, she'd kissed her. It had been a chaste kiss, just a mere brush of the lips against the side of her cheek, but it had been Aspen's first kiss and she could remember it clearly. Who else kissed the side of your cheek just a little while ago? And who else has blue eyes? I know that she has blonde hair now, but maybe it's dyed or it turned blonde. Aspen had wondered after that kiss if it meant that she and Charlotte were friends now, best friends, but alas, Charlotte never brought up the kiss again. In fact, she went right back to her bullying ways soon after. One day, Charlotte had pushed Aspen over during practice. Aspen's tights had laddered, and when Penny saw them, she almost exploded. Aspen tried to keep the identity of her attacker a secret, but Penny had managed to cajole, I don't actually know how to say that, the information out of her. Armed with the knowledge that Charlotte was up to her old tricks, Penny launched a crusade against Charlotte's father. The two had interacted politely at first, but when Charlotte's father refused to pay for a new pair of tights or even apologize for his daughter's misconduct, "You sure your Aspen didn't trip over her own feet? We all know she's not the most coordinated of dancers," Penny had started shouting. The two parents had exchanged insults for a good 5 minutes in the car park of the ballet studio, while the other mothers and fathers and little ballerinas stood around, gawping. The dispute had only been broken up after Miss Russian Lady came between them, her voice barbed, dramatic eyebrows, she drew them on with makeup pencil, raised so far up her forehead they looked like they were trying to escape. Penny and Charlotte's father backed down, but Penny's grudge didn't fade. After that unpleasant evening, she asked, nay ordered, Aspen to keep away from her. And then, about a month later, Charlotte stopped attending ballet lessons altogether. Penny viewed it as a victory. She thought she had managed to drive Charlotte and her father away for good with the power of dirty looks and snide remarks. Aspen wasn't so sure. In any case, Penny's victory had been short-lived because it was soon after the debacle with Charlotte that Pippa had stuffed her only daughter into their washing machine. Charlotte might have been a bully, but she'd never done anything that cruel. After all, there weren't any washing machines in the Russian lady's ballet studio. Aspen didn't think she was a bad person, but she wasn't entirely sure. She hadn't seen Charlotte in years. Aspen frowned. Why was she thinking about that now? Maybe it was because Charlotte, Pippa, and now Althea all had one thing in common. They were all far more self-assured and confident than Aspen herself was, and they used that to their advantage. Ever since Aspen could remember, she'd been pushed around by others. She was teased and harassed on a constant basis, even by people who were supposed to be her friends. Charlotte and Pippa had both turned their backs on her, but what about Althea? If the past was anything to go by, it seemed she too would eventually abandon Aspen when she grew tired of her. But Aspen didn't want to believe that of her new friend. She was overthinking things and getting confused because Althea herself was so very confusing, but that only made Aspen more interested in the other girl. She wanted to see her again. She simply had to. And so it was, for the third night in a row, that Aspen found herself exiting her house and trekking through Miss Lee's overgrown back garden. She hoped Miss Lee would forgive her for her transgressions. Examining a dead woman's home didn't seem like a very respectable pastime, but Miss Lee wouldn't mind now. As Althea had rightfully pointed out, she was beyond minding. At least Aspen wasn't trying to nick her stuff to turn over a quick profit. There wasn't much stuff left to nick other than the rusty old knife and all those books. Besides, Aspen told herself, as she let herself in through the kitchen window, maybe Miss Lee would be happy she was intruding. Aspen had never gone to Miss Lee's house willingly before. She'd only done so out of a grim sense of obligation. She'd suffered through their Sunday tea parties with a frozen grimace, trying her best to look like she was enjoying herself. Unfortunately, Aspen had never been a very good actress. She'd been even worse at smiling on demand, something that infuriated Miss Russian Lady to no end. Miss Lee had pretended not to notice, but as poor as her eyesight was, she must have realized how hollow Aspen's half-smiles were. It would have been obvious, even to a blind man, that Aspen hadn't wanted to be there. Now, for the first time in her life, Aspen was visiting Miss Lee's home 3 nights in a row, no less, because she legitimately wanted to. It was funny how Miss Lee's house had only become an intriguing location after its owner had died. Funny, and maybe a little bit sad. All of a sudden, Aspen felt a strong wave of sympathy for the departed Miss Lee. It was a shame this surge of sympathetic feelings was far too late. It wasn't possible to change the past. Alright, and that's where we will end it for today, I think. I will see you in the next video. Bye!